Charles DeRudio, born into Italian nobility, later became a career officer in the U.S. Army. He served with the 7th U.S. Cavalry during the infamous Battle of the Little Bighorn. Captain Frederick Benteen mockingly referred to him as Count No Account due to DeRudio's fondness for dramatic tales and his aristocratic demeanor. Despite this, DeRudio proved a competent officer, earning a promotion to first lieutenant on December 15, 1875. He was also generally respected by Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer and other high-ranking officers. Having lived through the ferocious encounter at Little Bighorn, DeRudio later penned a vivid letter detailing what he experienced. I managed to survive the chaos of the Little Bighorn battle that took place on June 25th and 26th. Now I'll relay my gripping personal experience from those 2 fateful days. Around 10 a.m. on the 25th, General Custer's scouts returned with alarming intelligence. They had come across a native encampment about 15 miles distant, situated along the Little Bighorn River. The scouts noted that the tribe seemed to be pulling back from our oncoming troops. We pressed forward for another couple of miles before Custer halted the column to formulate a plan of attack. He assigned companies H, D, and K to Colonel F.W. Benteen with directives to secure our left wing and eliminate any threats in their path. Companies M and G, under Colonel Reno's leadership and where I had been temporarily attached to Company A, formed the center. Meanwhile, Custer commanded Companies E, I, F, L, and C on the right flank. Company B was held in reserve to safeguard the supply train. We continued our march for several more miles before Reno's command received instructions to move at a trot and maintain formation until we reached the river, which lay 6 or 7 miles ahead. After arriving, we crossed the waterway and emerged onto an open plain, where we were promptly ordered to form a line for engagement. Our orders were to charge, so we advanced swiftly through a choking cloud of dust raised by the fleeing natives. The dust was so thick that it rendered us nearly blind. This forced Colonel Reno to halt and dismount the battalion. He quickly deployed a skirmish line, anchoring the right end near a dry creek overgrown with dense vegetation. While our mounts were led to shelter in the woods, the enemy launched a determined attack. We returned fire immediately, and the exchange lasted for roughly 30 minutes. Soon after, we discovered a few lodges in a clearing across the creek. Our whole skirmish line crossed over, only to find the lodges abandoned. Suddenly, around 200 warriors burst forth, unleashing a furious assault. Their sheer numbers and firepower left us with virtually no avenue for retreat. We were now encircled. Starting with just 100 soldiers, our force was quickly reduced as bullets rained down. As we crossed back over the creek, I, stationed at the rear, spotted a company flag that had been dropped. I turned back to recover it. While maneuvering through the brush, the flag became snagged, and I lost my grip. I dismounted to retrieve it and was leading my horse along the creek's southern bank when a bullet hit the animal. It panicked and galloped directly into the enemy lines, leaving me on foot and exposed, with nearly 300 Sioux warriors just 50 yards away. They fired at me, but by sheer luck, I wasn't hit. I darted into a nearby thicket where I could both conceal and defend myself. There, I encountered Interpreter Fred Gerard and Private Thomas F. O'Neill of Company G. They still had their horses, while I, like O'Neill, was without a mount. I suggested releasing the horses to avoid drawing attention, but they refused. Leaving them behind, I crawled through dense foliage to the deep, dry bed of the creek, hoping to remain hidden until dark, and then attempt a return to our unit. About 10 minutes later, while hiding in the dry creek bed, I heard gunshots close by, followed by the unsettling sound of native women nearby. I cautiously lifted my head to see several squaws engaged in a gruesome act, scalping what looked like a living soldier. 2 women were cutting, while others danced wildly in a grotesque ritual. The horror of what I witnessed is beyond description. Eventually, the women wandered off, presumably in search of more victims. I was left to reflect on my dire circumstances. Then I heard the crackle of flames. The natives had set the area on fire. Due to the dry conditions, the flames spread rapidly, and I was forced to leave my hiding spot. I crawled the same route I'd used to get in. Just as I was reaching the bank, I heard someone calling, "Lieutenant?" Though I couldn't immediately spot anyone, the voice continued. I followed the sound and soon found the same group I had left earlier, hidden in the creek bed. Gerard explained he'd left the horses tied up and followed after me on foot. Like me, they were deeply concerned about the approaching fire. Fortunately, a light rain began to fall, and the wind eased, which helped stall the flames, offering us a renewed chance at remaining concealed until night. By 3 p.m., we had several long hours to wait. During that time, we could hear and occasionally glimpse native warriors nearby. Their proximity was unnerving. It's hard to capture in words the rush of thoughts that filled my mind during those hours of anxious waiting. Finally, darkness fell, with thick clouds overhead, ideal cover for our escape. We crept from our hiding place and began making our way to the ford, 2 miles to the south across open terrain. Gerard and the scout rode, while the soldier and I clung to the horses' tails for guidance. Gerard warned that if he had to flee, he'd inform Colonel Reno of our position to ensure help arrived. As we crossed the plain, it was too dark to see clearly, but we heard voices of natives returning to their camp. Nearing what we assumed was the same ford we had crossed earlier that day, we realized we had misjudged the location and needed to find the correct spot. We crossed the river once, only to realize it was a bend and we'd need to cross again. During this second crossing, we unexpectedly came across 8 warriors. The riders bolted immediately, while the soldier and I dove into thick brush. I drew my revolver and knelt, prepared to defend myself. Miraculously, the warriors didn't pursue us. After some discussion among themselves, they continued on their way, believing perhaps that we had all escaped. I called to the soldier, and we regrouped. It became obvious that trying to cross the river again was futile, as every ford was heavily guarded. The night stretched on, and at daybreak we heard what sounded like a large troop moving through water. Peeking over the riverbank, I thought I saw soldiers, mounted on gray horses, wearing military gear, some even donning white hats. My spirits lifted when I spotted a figure in buckskin clothing and a white hat, whom I believed to be Captain Tom Custer. Convinced this was our regiment, I stepped forward and shouted, "Tom, don't leave us here." But I had made a fatal error. In response to my call came a deafening war cry and hundreds of gunshots. The native warriors had taken our men's horses and uniforms. The soldier and I dove back into the underbrush as bullets ripped through branches. We crawled out of the line of fire, disturbing the brush as we moved, which drew more fire from Indians on the bluffs. We aimed to cross a small clearing to reach a thicker wooded section. I carefully scanned the area first and saw 4 or 5 warriors approaching rapidly from 50 yards out. I found 2 cottonwood stumps close together and crouched behind them with the soldier. He took aim with his carbine. I held my revolver, ready to fight. The warriors hadn't seen us. When the lead rider was just 10 yards away, I fired. They were in single file and turned abruptly when I shot. O'Neill fired at the second warrior just as he tried to turn his pony. The shot struck true. The warrior dropped his reins and collapsed. The rider I had initially spotted fled shortly after. The rest of the group disappeared behind the trees. Though gunfire continued from the bluffs, it died down after we fired back. We returned to the thicket and observed the warriors above us, their horses tethered behind cover, and sharpshooters lying flat, rifles trained. The sounds of distant fighting, musket fire, cheers, and war cries still echoed. Our morale lifted when we recognized the familiar cheers of our fellow troops, but disappointment followed quickly. Flames began to engulf the woods where we were hiding, and we were forced to relocate again. We crawled close to the edge and found a dense cluster of mulberry bushes where we took shelter. The surrounding grass had been dampened by recent rain, and there was no wind, so the fire crept slowly. I was able to tamp it out with my gloves, and soon we were surrounded by burned-out brush, a small, secure refuge. From this vantage we could see without being seen. We observed natives moving around, one of whom stood guard nearby. Around 4 p.m., that sentry fired 4 rounds into the air. I assumed it was a signal. Then came a loud native voice repeating a chant 4 times. Following these signals, over 200 warriors rode away and crossed the river. About an hour later, the sequence repeated, and even more warriors departed. The shooting grew sparse and distant. By 6 p.m., the area was quiet. It appeared the tribes had vacated the battlefield. We hoped the regiment had also moved out. All we had to do now was wait for nightfall so we could cross the river and head toward the Yellowstone. We planned to build a raft and drift down to our supply base on the Powder River. We hadn't eaten or had water in a day and a half. At 8 p.m., we entered the river, crossing it twice before climbing the bluffs. We proceeded slowly, covering about 2 miles before I scaled a high ridge to scout the area. In the distance, about 2 miles, I spotted a campfire near the area where we believed our unit had been fighting. Unsure if it was native or friendly, we approached cautiously. Climbing hills and listening intently, we proceeded for over a mile. Atop another ridge, we paused and heard voices, too faint to identify. Then, unmistakably, we heard a mule bray, followed by the familiar challenge, "Halt! Who goes there?" The challenge wasn't directed at us, but reassured us we were close to our comrades. Roughly 200 yards from the fire, I shouted, "Picket! Don't fire! It's Lieutenant DeRudio and Private O'Neill." We ran forward. A cheer erupted from the picket post and Lieutenant Varnum. Varnum, always brave and efficient, rushed up, thrilled to see me alive. He had feared I was among the dead. I asked about the regiment, praying we were the only casualties, but my hopes were dashed. Varnum had no word on the 5 companies with Custer and confirmed that Lieutenants McIntosh and Hodgson had fallen. I reached camp around 2 a.m., but couldn't sleep, despite sheer exhaustion. I stayed up talking with Varnum, recounting my survival. Morning came quickly. I informed the officers that the natives had left the area. At 8 a.m., we spotted cavalry, first scouts, then an entire column. It was General Brisbane's force. Not long after, infantry appeared across the plain, led by General Gibbon. The sight of those familiar blue uniforms overwhelmed us. As Generals Gibbon and Terry entered camp, hardened soldiers wept openly. I must commend Private O'Neill. His courage and loyalty never wavered. He obeyed every command and stood by me like a true brother. I will always honor his bravery and his steadfast service during our ordeal. Thank you for watching Empire History Central. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share for more intriguing history discoveries.